Hello, everybody. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, good everything in the beautiful world, wherever you are. It's Wonderful Wednesday with our gorgeous Jessie. How are you, beautiful Jess? And of course, Morné, how are you?
Doing great.
So good to see you, Jess. Sorry, I know I've probably got a bit of a lag here. My fancy fiber internet just decided it's not working this morning. So what can I say? I'm on my backup, so please forgive any internet issues I will ask you up front. So, Jess, anything exciting happening in your world you want to share with us? Anything you're doing? How's it going on your new channel?
Oh, the new channel's going great, and I want to advertise a few things. This week, we're going to release the course, so that's super exciting, and you'll get copies of that. And then after that, we're going to also have, I'll release hopefully by next month, a second new show. So that one's going to just focus on, topics specific to the storms that we have in life, whether they're trials, temptations, challenges, and how do we go about addressing those in a biblical way with the authority that God's given us. So that will be super exciting, and it's well on its way. So tonight, if you get to tune in, we're going to talk about bigger fish to fry than the Antichrist. So
Oh, wow.
it's going to be a really good show.
I'm very excited. I'm very excited for that, and really, I'm so happy that you're doing so well with your. I had no doubt that your channel and your courses and everything. I just really have to say I've watched you for the last 2 years that you've been our favorite girl on the show, and it's been amazing to see how many storms you've weathered, and just the people that have sailed with us, the storminess, the full moon with crazy werewolves.
All the crazy stuff's going to come out, isn't it, Chantelle?
Well, I like them stormy seas, honey. So we're in this one. We're on this boat. We're doing it. It's amazing. But it's just so beautiful to see, Jessie, how you've progressed on your path and in your work. And it's just so wonderful to see how many people are there to support you through thick and thin. And we know even those that decide we are foe, there's never really a foe, just a beautiful friend in disguise. That's the way I see it. So I'm very, very grateful to have you here to talk about underground cities. Now, I know we've often touched on them, and I like those kind of little things happening. So I like to know what little gremlins are happening beneath the surfaces of our earth. So very happy to have you here today talking about the underground cities, particularly focusing on Emerald City, Mars, Valhalla, which is Viking heaven as far as I know, and Ragnarok.
Ragnarok.
There we go. So over to you, beautiful.
Yeah. Well, those are, as you said, those are underground cities. If people want to find out more from the system side on those cities, I've encouraged people to look into the book Initiates of the Flame. That's a high-level book for the Brotherhood system, particularly for those who are part of the Order of Melchizedek. And so you have to be in those upper orders. We've talked about that in some previous shows that, as you start to break down the different orders in the system, at the top, you have the Order of Melchizedek. Underneath them, you have the Order of the Phoenix and the Order of the Golden Dawn. So, when they're in those orders and they want to seek even higher enlightenment, the book that they're going to be given to reflect on is Initiates of the Flame by Manly P. Hall. Now, what's interesting is that this man was a Mason. He's considered the father, the founder of the Masons. And, the first question needs to be, why is this Mason, talking about secret cities? And, why did they bring that out in a book? Why did they want to reflect on that? And, I would propose that it's not just telling mythological stories. These are real places, and I would propose that that book, Initiates of the Flame, is what we call the Brotherhood coded, it's a coded map. It's more than just talking about mythical cities. Like, there are keys in that that tell you where to locate those cities. And why did a Mason need to inform others on how to locate these cities? What's interesting is then you bring in military and other connections, and really, what these are is it's giving much, much more, I'll just say, than, just thinking about or reflecting on things. So a lot of these high level books that we look at that come out of these different groups that are connected to the Brotherhood, so that could be, the Masons, the Kabbalah, the Satanists, the Jesuit Catholics, and the Mormons. A lot of this material is much, much more than just reflections or books to read. So as you look at Initiates of the Flame, I've talked about how in the system, you have people who are like mentors to you. Their job is to guide you, to be teachers. I've referred to a lot of my mentors in the system as my teachers. So that was individuals like Michael Carcock, Lori Cabot-Kent. And, their job is to basically kind of serve as that guiding hand as you're reflecting on things. And they're the ones who will challenge you with questions sometimes. They're also the ones that you go to when you want to find out the answers, but they don't ever directly give you the answer. If I were to ask a question about these secret cities, if I were to say, do these secret cities exist? I would get a response that would be a question back. They would say, do they exist? But if I were to say to them, oh my gosh, I was just reading about Valhalla, and it says in this book, Initiates of the Flame, that you cross Rainbow Bridge, and it says something about Route 66, and oh my goodness, like geographically, there's a Vahalla, Kansas, and it's on Route 66 across Rainbow Bridge. Is that where the underground city for Valhalla is located? And their response would be, do you want to see it? So that's when they would take you to go see it. So what's interesting is that these places are real. And in fact, I just gave the location for Valhalla. It is in in Kansas. And, there's a lot more that goes on in these underground cities. If we're speaking honestly, why does the system have things underground? It's because, for many, many generations, they had to hide the evils that they did. And, what are those evils? That includes, sexual exploitation of children, eating human flesh, torture, satanic ritualistic abuse. That's what happens down in these secret cities. And it's a whole underworld where, basically humans are the main money that the system is buying, selling, and trading off of. And it's not just, our physical bodies, it includes the spiritual bodies as well. How is the military implicated in that? our U.S. military has been involved since after World War II, where they invited, or not, I won't say invited, but where the Nazis came into the United States and began to run a lot of the projects, experiments, and programs through the U.S. military that were being done on humans. So that's how some of those interconnections are. So, you will always see that, these underground cities through the Brotherhood are heavily guarded by the U.S. military and by the system. You know, I would love for other people to come forward about their stories of these cities. It would really be an interesting conversation. One of the first ones that I brought out was Emerald City, which is located under the Pentagon. And, there's interesting things with it. There are tunnels that are underneath these cities. The things that I remember about Emerald City was that as you go underground, there is a bridge that you have to cross to get into that city. It was on that bridge that I first met what people now call a Palladian. I did not know this being as a Palladian. That term was never used when I was a child. I knew that as an angel, or another term they would use is a morning star. And you have heavenly morning stars and you have earthly morning stars, which morning star is a position that usually the very top level sisters of light in the system are called morning stars, and they're connected to the Sanhedrin. Many of the morning stars work directly under the Sanhedrin and guard not only the underground cities, but a lot of the underground breeder programs. So the morning stars will someday have to talk about more about them, but they get interesting. But that's where I first met those beings, and I was introduced by some of the high-level light side of the system, Sisters of Light. What I saw was that I'll just call them the beings because I didn't use that term Palladians, but their job was to teach a lot of the Sisters of Light who were being brought into the system or being raised up in the system how to use light, energy, and song for healing. So, they work a lot with the frequencies, the vibrations, the colors, things like that, in order to bring healing when people need that. So, we're talking very high level somatic magic that they're using. And, it gets interesting. As you cross, go ahead.
Sorry, I just have a question for you. Before we talk about going in there, who funds these tunnels? Do we know?
You get all sorts of high-level elite people who fund them. Basically, it goes back to the nations, and I would propose that, a lot of the financial backing comes through the Holy See, which is the financial backer for the Vatican. And they're directly underneath the Sanhedrin as well. So that makes it very interesting when you bring Israel into all of this. But yeah, so as you cross those bridges, there were some very unique things. So I got to say, there's several entrances into these cities. I brought out things about the Frank Lloyd Wright houses. He was not the only architect that built special buildings for the Brotherhood system. There's many other architects who did. they were very skilled at building houses that would have entrances and exits into these underground systems. So I can remember, I'm not going to say the name of whose home it was, but I remember one of the homes that was connected to Emerald City was this, massive big mansion. And as you go down into kind of like the lower levels, I just remember it was like they had this bedroom that really had no walls. As you walked in, the left side was this massive waterfall that went through several floors of the house. Um, and then like there was a bed kind of like in the middle, what you would call the middle of the room. And as you looked out past that, there was this massive rainforest underground. And so that rainforest connects, like if I was on Rainbow Bridge, it would be kind of that left upper side of Emerald City.
Jessie, sorry,
go ahead.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but I want to just clarify. So the entrances to, let's say, particularly to Emerald City now, it's not a spiritual entrance, it's a physical entrance. So you're actually going in.
Some are physical, there are some spiritual gates as well.
Okay. All right, cool. That's
so it just depends where you enter in or not. Like some of the ways, like if you go to some of these palaces or castles now that they make into tourist places, usually as you go out into the gardens, or you will see this sometimes in the basements or certain atriums within the houses or certain rooms. It just depends on the place. And I'm going to stop here because I think it's important to kind of talk about the variety of entrances or exits that there really is. So like some of the palaces I went to, like they would have rooms, and you would notice as you look in each room that there's a set of 3 mirrors in every room. Why did they have 3 mirrors in every room? It's because those mirrors are used as entrances and exits. It gives you a 3-way doorway where you can go in or out in either direction. Another thing that you would see usually with that is that somewhere they would have the old telephones. George and I have brought out on the shows that the telephones used to be used for contacting the dead or for seances. So a lot of that would be in conjunction that they're, what really is contact with the dead? It's contact with the spirit world, which, as we talk about entrances and exits, you're not just talking about the physical world, you're talking about dimensional access into the spirit world. So sometimes they would use mirrors. That's why a lot of witches and warlocks will have mirrors, especially black mirrors. Then another thing they would use is you would see literal gates set up. So like some of the places where I went, they had, vast gardens. But then it's like in the, like the middle of the courtyards of the gardens, you would see these actual like gates or entrances or exits set up where it's like, that doesn't make sense. It's like all these weird labyrinths and entrances and exits into them. Those are used during ritual times. They will have, both spirit beings and physical people who will come into the property through those different directions, and then they will exit through those different directions when they need to. And so there, that would be, it's a physical and a spiritual entrance or exit. Sometimes they will have fake doors, where if you were to be at the home and you open this door, you're going to see this brick wall and you're like, why is there just a brick wall? Or, maybe it may even, I can remember one of the places literally, like, you open the door and literally there was a whole nother building like right there. So there was really no way to excessively use that door. So it's like, why do they have a door that just goes into another building, but you don't get entrance into that building from how it looks, you know? So they'll do fake entrances, exits. Um, Oftentimes, stairwells can be used as an access point. Um, you know, they loved using, especially the windy staircases that they would randomly put in the middle of homes, and that, you know, those would be used. With those too, they can change shape or direction. So, um, you know, I guess I want to use the term loosely, but the magic stairwells, that's something that is common. And we do see that even produced. A lot of movies pick up that concept and will use those magic stairwells in movies that deal with witchcraft and other forms of sorcery. Um, so a lot of those things like that really does happen in, you know, in the real world, that these witches and warlocks use these things to get in and out of places. So yeah, they used, you know, they used real houses, they use real buildings. Um, you know, they purposely will build buildings that have underground tunnel accesses or underground tunnels. Like, you know, that you'll see that in the military on the bases. You'll see that with hospitals, with schools, with the old Catholic churches. Um, you know, where even they went as far as to have incinerators in those basements. Um,
We've
you know,
heard some people say a lot of the celebrities have got tunnels coming from their houses. Now, I would just want to ask two things. Is it elevators in these castles and palaces and whatever it is you're talking about, as well as these houses of celebrities? I know a very famous one with a starting with the name O.W., Oprah, is often said, has been said to have underground tunnels from her house, and a number of other people as well. Do they use like elevators? How do they get there? And it's like, um, do these tunnel systems that go from their houses, do they all link to these underground cities you're talking about or similar to them, or have they got their own little merry carnival concoction going on privately? Is it all a linked thing? Does it happen privately? I'm just curious.
I think it depends on, you know, individuals and the places in those situations. The answer is some yes and others no. So it really is dependent on, you know, individuals and how high they are, what their position is, what their connection and access needs to be to those things. So it's not everyone across the board. Um, you know, we know that Oprah was and is a high priestess in the system. So as that, you know, she definitely has a lot of interconnections, especially in that, you know, California or Western Quadrant area where her jurisdiction is. And, you know, do I believe that some of those connections even go as far as, you know, her humanitarian work and connections with South Africa? I do. Um, so, you know, it is very individualistic. And elevators, yes, they sometimes do use elevators, especially the old ones, and through different, you know, forms of, I guess, it's really hard to describe how they do that thing with the elevators, but there are missing floors that don't show up, um, you know, within certain elevators. So even public buildings, like if you go out and count how many floors some of these places have, and then you go into the elevator, you're like, wait a second, there's something off. That, you know, they're keeping floors back, but then you have to try to figure out which floor um, they're hiding. Usually there is a lot with the 13th floor where that floor is hidden from people. But there's other floors as well. And many of these buildings will have subfloors in between the actual floors. And that will be, you know, how those in the system will move from one place to another. So, yeah, it gets interesting with all of that because, you know, the question is then, you know, if they are able to move in the spirit world, why do they not use that all the time? Why do they sometimes use physical things? I don't have the answers to all those questions. You know, that was one of mine too as a kid. It's like, you know, if we're able just to go through a portal, how come we don't do that every time? How come, you know, when we were in Rockford, Illinois, how come there was 5 or 6 different entrances they would use into that underground system and they would shift it? You know, and it's almost like there's um, a pride in what would you call it? Kind of like a elusiveness that they want to tempt fate. They want to, you know, parade before their rituals out in the middle of the night across the grass and through, you know, through the different areas they're going through um, to see if they're going to get caught. You know, it's almost like there's that pride that they want to be actively doing it where they could be seen, but yet they take all measures to try to ensure that they're not seen. And, you know, as a kid, it just never made sense to me. It's like, why would you do that? Why do we have to walk through the culvert into the, you know, sewer areas to go down into the catacombs this time, you know?
Yeah.
And so, you know, there's not direct answers for that. But what I gleaned out of that as a kid was that um, that they made it so that they never, you know, or I won't say never, but they made it so that there were so many entrances and exits, and every time they used a different one. And I believe that that was really to try to cause confusion. It was to um, try to, you know, make it so that all the children who were involved in these things, you know, if they ever tried to tell, it wouldn't make sense to people. People would say, "Oh, that can't be real because, you know, it doesn't make logical sense. If you, you know, are able to go through a portal, then why are you, you know, why would they then go through the graveyard or the culvert?" You know, and so then it makes the children's stories more unbelievable and more questionable.
Yeah.
Or even, you know, sometimes the entrances or things would be so small that they would be like, you know, no, people can't fit through there. There's no way you went through there. Um, so I think some of it is to make it seem unbelievable.
Absolutely. And also just to flaunt their ability to do these things in the different dimensions, right? Just kind of flaunting that. That's also the way I would see that. We can do it like this or we can do it like that. It's kind of like they got everything going for them. Very interesting. Okay, so you get in there, and I know you mentioned you seeing this forest, like an underground forest. I mean, and I think we've spoken quite a while ago, and you mentioned that there's suns, like cities. Tell us what is going on there, please. In Emerald City, particularly.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, there is a lot of, you know, there's underground light, not necessarily even from the sun or the things that are under there, um, you know, which includes stars as well. But um, the way that God has created things, there is a natural light that happens. Um, and so I can't describe that. I can't give people the scientific evidence of that. I'll just say that it's fully operational, that they don't need electricity. They don't have to you know, have all these wires or connection things. They don't have to hook up all those big, you know, wind farms or things like that in order to get energy for those things. Those are more for ventilation because they have to have air under there. If that air quality is bad, of course, then, you know, there's already areas in there that have such low oxygen that, you know, the regular human would struggle to be under in those areas. So that's why they've got those big fans, so they can keep building those areas deeper and deeper and have air and ventilation for them. But you know, yeah, so that's some of the interesting things about that. And, you know, there is a rainforest under there that is part of how they get in that particular city. That's part of how they get the oxygen, because we know that trees produce oxygen. So some of these underground cities, you know, they don't have to find ways to even ventilate or things like that, because there are natural things they use down there to do that. You know, I remember that under there's also a massive cavern, or, you know, it's like a series of caverns that I believe, if I remember correctly, that they are even deeper than the Grand Canyon. There is some connections as you follow that do connect to other canyons. But
Hang on,
that
what
canyon was used to
size?
separate the city.
What size are we talking here? I mean, this sounds absolutely humongous.
It is, yeah, it is. And that separates what they consider the light side of the city, which is Emerald City, and the dark side of the city, which is where the giants were in that area. So,
Wow.
So, what do they do in these cities? I mean, I know there's obviously nefarious things going on. Are people living there like humans, like humans? Are they just used to go up and down? Is it just a space that's created for the nefarious ones to do their dodgy things? What happens down there?
work.
Work.
That's, you know, the best way to describe it is the inner beehives. You know, where there's still the forced, tortured labor. You know, whether it just depends on where in the city you are and what exactly the asset is that they're procuring is. But you have, you know, a lot of different things happening there. You've got, you know, the underground breeder programs. You've got the different things that they're experimenting and doing projects on. You have mass markets that people would not even believe exist that are happening down there underground. You know, in some of the third world countries, those markets are more, or access to those markets is more readily displayed. But, you know, there's just things that we're like, what? This can't be real, because we don't see it above ground. You know, and we think, where do they get some of this stuff that they put in the movies? You know, where did that thought even stem from or come from? And, you know, a lot of it is put out in the movies. They want to present it as a fable or as a myth or a story or as something untrue. And the reason they do that is so that if any of the survivors and victims who are underground make it to the surface, they want to be able to, you know, discredit and cut their stories off from the get-go and have nobody believe them about these things.
Oh. So it's actually quite pretty. It's nice there. It looks pretty.
It does, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
My question is, did they create it or did they find it and used it? Did they
Yeah,
create
I
it?
believe the land was found and they utilized it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's all for nefarious activities, these underground cities. It's not like there's a whole lot of good things going on there. They're
Right.
kind of concocting their concoctions there. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that would be a good way to put it.
Okay, so that's Emerald City. Now, what can you tell us about, let's say, Valhalla? What would make Valhalla different to Emerald City and Mars? And what was the other one?
Ragnarok.
Ragnarok.
Yeah, they're all different. They all have different purposes and meanings. We got to look at overall that these are cities that are used, as a form of managing some of the systems underground or hidden assets. So all of them are different and have different purposes. Valhalla is, they're in that Kansas area underground. And with that, they really, let me think of a better way to put this. But you have a city that goes, very deep. I just remember that there were a lot of very tall walls in Valhalla, and these walls serve as kind of the gates, like where when you go into that area, there you have to get through the gates in order to get into that city. There's a lot more of the connection with Valhalla, with that one connects directly to England, to the area and to some of the castles that are connected with King Arthur. And so with that, then you also have that direct connection to, what they would consider the Excalibur and the stone in the rock, or the sword in the rock. And I would also propose that because of that connection to the UK, that then it's also Valhalla is connected with two other cities directly connected to the UK, which would be Avalon, which is said to be the home of King Arthur, where you have the Round Table. So, where they would meet with other beings, as well as the 12, those they call the 12 knights. And, so that's one of their spiritual gate cities. And then also Edinburgh, which is the backup, in the system. They will sometimes refer to some of these underground cities as Jerusalem, or as Israel, or Judah. So they have different names for some of them that are interchangeable. But those ones mainly, were connected to some of the places where not only do they do rituals, but they have storehouses where they store their gold or precious artifacts or sacred artifacts, sacred relics. So Valhalla, there is traffic that goes through there, but that's not like a whole, like it, I guess I would call it probably more a fortress than necessarily a city, because it's not, Emerald City is more like what we would typically think of as a city, where you're going to see, a lot of residents, you're going to see people who are living there, but who are in bondage to labor. You're going to have kind of that city feel. In Valhalla, it's more like a castle fortress, is what you're going to get there. Now, when you get then to Mars, that's even more different. It's like you're walking into ancient Egypt there, but that's located under Area 51. And they have, I just remember as a kid seeing 3 massive pyramids that were under there. And, it's more like probably the Mayan or the Aztec feel when you go down there. There's not a lot of change of, you don't have that active city feel or technology necessarily. There is a lot of unique technology, but it's not like what you would find in Emerald City. And, you know, that's a sacred place with Mars, where, you know, they will have people there. Like we were brought there when they did some pre-ritual preparation for end time events. So that place is directly connected with some of those end time events that are supposed to come and happen. The closest thing, if you want to know what Mars is kind of like, I would encourage people to watch that fourth Indiana Jones movie about the crystal skulls. That is very similar to some of the things that I experienced there in Mars under Area 51. So the other shows that would be very similar to Mars would be the Stargate series. And, you know, in there, they have these beings that have, you know, or humans that are hosts to these beings. You know, you do get some of that weird stuff, you know, where.
Okay, when you say weird stuff, can you please just expand on that? All right. I want to know
Like
what you mean.
worms that, you know, communicate psychopathically through their hosts, you know. Yeah, you get weird creatures. That's all I can say. And
Are these all linked
but
to
I think it's
military?
fallen angels. But repeat that.
Okay, sorry, I don't want to interrupt you because I find this so interesting. Are these things also are these cities all linked to military bases?
Those particular ones, yes.
So, what type of military activity goes on in these cities?
That is going to be a whole nother show.
You see, you're so bad. You're just lucky I can't fly through the Zoom camera right now.
Yeah, there's a lot of activities that go on with the military through those things.
Okay, then I think that would actually be interesting if we could at a later stage maybe touch on that, because I think for me more and more, just as I'm hearing about these things intuitively, I feel the military is linked to all of this stuff somehow. And I'm trying to understand the magnitude of I know it's big. I see the picture in front of me, if you know what I'm saying. But
Right.
I'm trying to get to grips with it step by step. And as I get more and more, understand more and more about what this has been about, for me, the military is everywhere. And I want to know how that is linked to this and how they operate as much as possible. But yes, as you said, I'll let you off the story for another day. Okay.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it goes to the world militaries, and you know, we have to remember that you know, the way that we've been taught, everything is separated by nations. And you know, we're taught that each nation has its own military, which they do. But those things are just covers for what's really happening, I guess what we'll call the real world. In the real world, you know, what you have is you have God's angelic army, you have Lucifer's fallen angel army, and you have mankind. You know, with that, you have, you know, other, I wouldn't classify them as other beings as in extraterrestrials or aliens, but you have other beings that also came about through the breeding of fallen angels and women, and that would be the Nephilim. So, you know, that's what the world that I grew up in. And, you know, so really it's not even the US military or the nation's militaries you have the world governing military, which, you know, the world governing alliance goes by many different names: the Satanic, the Druidic Council, the Galactic Federation, the Federation Alliance. You know, and they split into many sub-chambers, both higher and lower chambers. So, you know, who are some of the lower chambers? I would propose things that we see, like the Council of 10, you know, NATO, the EU, the European Union, WHO, the CDC. All of these are lower chambers within that World Governing Council. So that's how it really breaks down. And, you know, the military is just really an offshoot of those who are serving the council and who serve in their departments, you know, so.
But if you just look at the whole structure of how that entire system works, and I'm not just necessarily talking about the war machines now, the actual military that fights and blows things up. I'm talking about the whole way that the entire system is structured. It's so militant. I don't know if that's the right word, but it's like if you look at Satan and the way he likes to operate, right? It's very militaristic. You've got to have rank. You've got to have hierarchy. You've got to have bloodline. You know, you've got to have all these things in order for you to have position, right?
Right.
And if you just look at the whole royal family, it's all, everything is about military. All their parades and charades are about military. There's always the military element. Yeah?
Yeah, absolutely.
Just
and then,
interesting.
you know, as we look further at that military, you know, that's exactly what Ragnarok is in Antarctica, and it extends to Alaska areas as well. But now we get to your favorite part of the show, where we talk about, you know, we'll call them mythical things. But, you know, you ask what happens at these bases, you know, what do they really do? And, you know, it's a world that most people can't imagine. We've read it in fairy tales. We've, you know, seen it on shows that deal about myths and, you know, but some of the things that they do, you know, besides breeder programs for humans, there are breeder programs in the system for creatures. And, you know, these originally are, you know, they're all creatures that God created. And we've been told that they're only myths, that they're fake, they're made up by somebody's imagination. But you have to ask, are things like dragons or unicorns or, you know, Pegasus, or something, even some things more elaborate, are those things real? Do they exist? Do some of these creatures have magical powers or abilities? You know, why are they taken? Why are pieces of these creatures, you know, harvested or used for certain high-level rituals or incantations? You know, you've got this whole, I guess we'll call it a magic market, where, you know, they sell very unique things. And, you know, I'm always a curious person, so, you know, I don't go into many for fun. I always, you know, put oil on my shoes and go in for the purposes of anointing the land or property. But I encourage people, you know, go into your local witchcraft paraphernalia stores. You know, look and see, what are they selling, what's on the shelves. You know, you're going to find interesting things. You might find some things that are labeled, you know, adrenochrome. One of the most interesting things you can find is something labeled dragon's blood, which is dried and then used in rituals. You know, where did that come from? Is it really from dragons? How is it used in rituals? What do they need it for? And if it's real, then we have to pose the question, are dragons real? We know scripture talks about them.
Okay.
Scripture talks about Leviathan and others. Go ahead.
So it's clear that there is all sorts of dodgy breeder programs occurring beneath the surfaces of our earth, in these underground cities. It's exactly what you're saying. I know we've kind of
Yeah.
touched on the dragons before, which really, as you're speaking, I must say my belly fills with dread to think about further levels of depravity that could possibly exist. So, is there anything you can tell us that you think we can deal with right now? Because I'm very aware that we do need, even those of us who are open to this kind of stuff, we do need to receive things in bite-sized chunks as well. So, is there anything else around that that you can reveal to us? Because it makes sense. Yes, I'm pretty sure. And I would love to actually do a decode or a deep dive into that with you. Is like with the dragons, for example, why do they need their blood? How do they harvest their blood? What do they use it for? Are they? I would like to go more into that at some point. I know it's not probably a topic for today, but
Yeah.
I'm certainly writing it down, Jessie. I'm not going to forget it.
Well, I'll give a topic of research for people. You can find a lot of things about. We've talked about Aquino and his work with the U.S. military. I'll propose a question. Why did Aquino name his computers, two of them, Glinda and Thor? We know Glinda is the good witch out of the Wizard of Oz. And where's the main place that story revolves around? Interestingly enough, not only do you have Emerald City, where the wizard is, but you also have Valhalla, Kansas. So, they don't say the exact area in Kansas. They say more Kansas City, but it's interesting that they still have Kansas in that area. So could it be, that his computers are strategically named for the purposes of keeping records and information that he was keeping as they did projects and experiments in these different areas? So what would that mean about Thor then? I would propose that Aquino did have direct interactions in Antarctica and Alaska at the so-called underground city Ragnarok, which is a subterranean military base, which means that the majority of that base is underground, under ocean ground, in those lower depths and underwater. So, I believe that that's the connection with Linda and Thor. And, were there other military computers that have mysterious names that connect them to these underground cities? I believe there are. And, so people can look into those things. He teases about those computer names. So, I would go back, do research, find where he puts out that information. Where does he state anything about those things? Because he was always coding information. A lot of stuff he put out is parodies, which are meant to be spoofs or jokes off of things. But his parodies really had a lot of parallels to things that were going on in the experiments and the projects that they were doing, especially with the Star Wars projects. And, not just Star Wars, you then have other projects like the Phoenix Project. You have, what was the other one I was just thinking of? The Jedi programs, and, the special training that they did with the First Earth Battalion. and the think tanks. And I believe there's a lot of interconnections with all these things. And so,
What's
you know,
the first battalion? What is that?
oh, that's a fun one, Chantelle.
Sounds fun.
Those are
It
the individuals who, you know,
immediately flags.
another name for some of those trained by the 1st Earth Battalion are ghost warriors. These are the military that aren't seen, aren't heard, and do their warfare almost solely in the spirit and in the spirit world.
Wow.
So, you know, you're
Okay.
talking things where these people are trained to go into their extraterrestrial state, which means they can change or manifest their between their physical and their spiritual states at will. You know, they're able to manifest things physically from the spirit, and it gets really interesting. But yeah, look up 1st Earth Battalion, and you know, there's a direct link with them with the Galactic Federation. That's really who they're through, and so all of these things interconnect. You know, it's all just pieces of a big puzzle.
So these you call it shapeshifters if they're able to move between different states. I would imagine they could take on different shapes and forms in their bodies as well. If they're part of, like what you say, the ghost warriors, right? Are they actually physical in form? Do they take on a human form, like you and me, and just then zip
They
in and
are
out?
humans. Yeah, they are
Okay.
humans with a physical form, but they've learned to, you know, change the state of matter in their body at will. So it's actually one of the highest forms of blood magic and alchemy.
I was going to say, I'm just trying to figure out what type of energies would be used for that. And as you said, makes sense. Blood magic and alchemy. Yeah, where they can just, and it's obviously not done for positive purposes. Let's put it that way. This would be if you
No,
are part of a.
I would say there are positive purposes sometimes that come out of it.
What would that be?
You have the good side that are, you know, protecting humanity and protecting the things that exist. And then you have the dark side that are, you know, destroying or utilizing those things for nefarious purposes. So you definitely do have a good side to that. You know,
We're
the
not
good
talking the
side are
light
those.
side. So I'm just trying to differentiate between the good side and the light side, because I would imagine
So
this
yeah,
would
so the good side, we could say, with that, I use that term good loosely. I am speaking of the light side where, you know, they are fighting to preserve, to protect, to keep safe. You know, they're known as the guardians of those things. And so you do have that, you know, it's more time honored tradition where these people are born into families where, you know, you've got generational keepers um, of these things, and you know, guards of the secrets, guards of the secret scrolls or books that talk about these things. So you do have that light side of the system that is in direct opposition to the dark side in some of these things.
Okay.
Wow, it's quite complex, isn't it? When you really start looking at the different layers of this. So it really is, as you say, you know, working within that system, but still being good and pure
Yeah.
and what have you. Very interesting. I would love us to at some point as well. I know we've spoken a lot about the what was the first one? Looking
Emerald
Glass,
City.
Star Wars, and the Voice of God. I would love for us at some point as well to, yeah, look at these other programs such as the Jedi, the Phoenix, that sort of stuff. If you're open to it, but not now, in future programs as well, because I think these things are very interesting for me anyway, and I hope our viewers agree, because I think a lot of this is what they're imparting, as you say, well, into toys, games, sort of things, with the kids. That's becoming normalized. And what is one, where does one draw the line with this? And I think it's so
Yeah.
good to be able to at least understand what it's about. And we as parents or grandparents or whatever, at least we can know then what we're dealing with, because
Yeah.
wow, this level of deception, it's bottomless, right?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, I wanted to there was actually one thing I wanted to ask you. When you say these cities have always been there and they kind of took over them, now again, that interests me because I've been lately looking a lot at like the whole Tartaria thing, where it's very obvious that there has been buildings, technology from a long time ago that was harnessed in very different ways. Are we looking at something similar in these underground cities? Who
Let me
created
correct. I wasn't saying that the cities themselves had always been there or that God created the cities per se. I was saying that the land, like some of that underground areas like the rainforest and the different caverns, things like that, that's what has always been there, that they
Okay,
utilized that land and built cities and other things. But do I believe that technology goes back and is very old? Yes, like looking at cities like Atlantis and other things, we see some of that more what we'd call ancient technology, which was very advanced. We even see some of that in Israel or Egypt. How did they build the pyramids? How did they pick up rocks that were bigger than them? How did they move those things? Yeah, so
really interesting. You know what I'm just loving about the place where we're at right now is that these topics are no longer taboo. So whether you agree with them or not, I think there's one thing that is so important is that, and so true, is that we can realize we've all been lied to, right? So whether you agree with whatever narrative about any particular topic, I just think it's amazing that we are able to see, unearth, look at, and figure out and decide for ourselves, as humanity, what was true and what's not true. And I think it's such an exciting time for us to be discovering and rediscovering these ancient things. I'm very excited for that, I have to say. Wow.
yeah.
Anyway, Jess, I think, wow. Time flies when you're having fun. I think I should do like a little jingle on that, because that's exactly how I feel every time I look at this time. I want to say thank you so much. I've found this so interesting, and we're definitely going to go into that more. Love to know anything, from our viewers as well. If you guys have any questions around this, and or if you have any like relevant information, because I think this is so important. It's not just tunnels and deep underground military bases where kids and just are being trafficked, and trains and things, whatever it is they do there. But I mean, these are thriving communities. This is a thriving economy. I mean, it's insane. And it's just like done on all these different dimensions and all these different ways. And we sit, having to put gas in our cars and complain
Right?
about how expensive. No wonder they don't care how expensive airplane tickets have become, right?
Right? They're not working off any of that system at all. That's just a way for them to make more money on us and make our life torturesome and hellish,
I mean, exactly. And we like so dumb. We just sit here, oh dear. We've got to go and buy a ticket. Take 3 days with hectic, what do you call this, jet lag?
They actually call those things incentives, Like, how do they get us to work and, make sure they're getting their bang for their buck, They give us fake holidays, we think family times, vacation time, and we have to work extra to request the time off and, make sure we get to have our fun time, and then we pay, you know?
I mean,
So
oh, jet lag, jet lag, jet lag. We drag ourselves through many international airports, although we could be zooming through a portal. I mean, how cheeky is that? That is like just so selfish of them.
right? Right? Oh, crazy.
I actually have a question for you, just in closing. What what good do you think it does us as the average human being on this planet to know this information? Do you think that by knowing what's going on, we have the ability to change it? Because I do believe knowledge is power,
Yeah.
but power we can use in one way or the other. So that's always my reason for doing these extreme type topics, definitely,
Mhm.
because I do think that we need to know. And I do think that not everyone can handle it though. So now that we know what's happening in there, I mean, what do we do? Do we go like diving around for portals using our dowsing sticks to see where the portal in several cities? So we
You
want to go
gotta
check
learn
what.
how to operate those portals, Chantelle, we'll work on that some more.
I'm extremely jealous. You do know how jealous I am about this, that these guys are in and out there. I'm like for years thinking, when on earth am I going to teleport?
We gotta hear you sing, Chantelle, and Morné, I'm sure, your beautiful
That's
opera
why
voice is
I
gonna open
can't.
all the gates at one time.
I can do that. I'm gonna go save those dragons that they like mistreat and all the children and all the creatures. I'm just thinking about
Right.
there's like whole habitats, God's like you spoke earlier about God's creation is creatures there. And what they do to the creatures above, just imagine what they do to the creatures below. So now I'm all in it. Now I want to go save the animals and the children down there. So let's portal away.
Yeah.
I'll
The good news is that, I fully believe that our president has been, not the fake one, but the
Mm.
real one. Um, I believe that he and the good military have been doing just that, there isn't anything at a personal level that you or I or the average person can do. We're talking entire kingdoms built within this system that are strongholds. And, they've been generational strongholds for a long time. And it took armies to be able to take down this system and to really go after it in order to free people. And I believe that they've been working in conjunction with the Lord. That's the only way that the enemy's kingdom is going to come down, is because the Lord says, enough, your time that was allotted is done. And that's exactly what the Lord has said. Their time is done. And he said it's time to expose the evil. And he's been bringing that forward. So, what are the best things that we can do? Is that we're talking major spiritual warfare that these individuals on the good side working with the Lord, it is a battle unlike anything that we've ever seen. And the greatest thing that we can do is really devote ourselves to pray and intercede for those individuals. God's given them special abilities, He's given them gifts. We know the Lord is with them, but it doesn't make what they have to see or experience any easier. Think through my stories that I've shared about, the things that I've seen and witnessed as a child, and then imagine, being the adults who go in there and who are seeing this stuff for themselves. Um, when you haven't grown up in that world and you're coming upon it, where you're seeing mass amounts of marketed humans, you're seeing the human markets, you're seeing the eating of the flesh firsthand, you know, um, those are not things that you can't take those pictures and those images out of your head. the smells, the sounds, the sights. So we really need to be in prayer for those people because, you know, the things that they have had to do, you know, the cost of freedom has been greater than most people could ever comprehend. Because, you know, think about it, with true freedom, you know, um, the majority never have to know the depth of the evil that is really in this world. They never see that, they never hear it, they never truly comprehend it. And you know, so we'll just pray the Lord bless those who have seen it. And you know, God is so good that he gives us that ability to overcome those things, you know, but those people still need to be able to, after the fight, come to that place of peace and rest and goodness that the Lord has for them. Um, you know, so just taking those moments to honor every day, upholding those who have paid the price for the freedom of many. And I think that's a good place to end, Chantelle.
I'm sitting here and I'm just, as you're speaking, my whole body is just getting beautiful chills because I think that's exactly, you know, what touched me is that the cost of freedom has come at a very high price.
High price, yeah.
Yeah, and I thank God for people like yourself who have been brave enough to go there and see firsthand just how depraved it is. And that we have, in our own way, everyone, and I really bless everybody who has believed these stories, from not just you, Jessie, but thousands of other survivors and overcomers out there who have, for years and years and years, you would know, been trying to tell the world what is going on, and
Yeah.
being told you mad, you crazy, been locked up, been just, thank you everyone who has done that,
Mhm.
because now, you know, the rest of us can finally cotton on and actually do something and say, wow, all right, well, maybe you're right, maybe you're not lying
Yeah.
after all. um, so thank you for that. And on that note, I think let's end in prayer, because I think everyone, there's lots of prayer that is needed at this point, definitely.
Yeah. Heavenly Father, we just thank you for this great discussion and we thank you for the time together. We thank you, or I thank you for the time to have a place and a platform to share the things that I have experienced. And I just lift up all those today who have and pieces of a puzzle and their own experiences, Lord. I thank you that you allow us to share these things, to validate one another, also to confirm and to prove to each other that these are real places, these are real things that we experience, that there is a system uh, that abuses people and causes horrific tortures and um, abuses, and they cover it up, Lord. And we ask that the time for cover up will end. We ask that literally that you will remove that veil and that you will reveal to the world the truth, because your eyes see everything that happens. You see everything that's going on. I ask specifically for those who have been in the military, Lord, those who have or who are bound under their service and their duty to keep secrets, Lord. We ask that there would be no more secrets, that all things would be laid bare and brought to the forefront. We ask for your judgments to go forth, Lord, that where evil has been committed, that you will bring your righteous judgment. We ask that the evils that have been committed will not continue from our generation to the next. We ask that we may be continue to be faithful in all that you've given us so that we may end these horrific abuses for the next generation. And we ask that our generation may be those that raise up the children, that raise up your banner of love over us, and that we may be the generation that brings in the victory of your hand over evil, Lord, as we watch this system fall and crumble. And we thank you that your every thought towards us is always for good, that your desire is for that we may be blessed, that we may have a future and a hope. And so we thank you for that. We take hold of that, and we use that as to stir our hearts onward in this fight. And we ask that you would increase our endurance, increase our perseverance. Let us keep pressing forward until we have taken hold of the prize, which is freedom for all, Lord, life for all, goodness from the wealth of your storehouses for all. We thank you for the work that you did on the cross. We thank you for your precious blood, which has made us a kingdom of priests. We thank you for your work that gives us the authority to go forward in your name and to right the wrongs that have been done by this evil system. So we thank you for all these things and ask that you would help us to continue to stand bold in that authority, because you have made us those who have the authority to govern and to steward this kingdom and this earth. And so, Lord, we just take that full responsibility to do that. And we will be faithful stewards of that. We thank you and we praise your name, Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Jess. Wow, it was lovely. Okay, everybody, thank you so much for joining us again for another amazing connection with our beautiful Jessie on Aquarius Rising Africa. If you haven't already, please give us a like, share, subscribe, share, all over. Thank you so much, and we will catch you very soon again. And God bless you. Take good care of yourselves. See you soon.
Bye.